In the middle, they can stop me in the middle if they want to wait till the end. I don't care.
All right. Good afternoon. We're going to start the second session. This is called Tenant Association Effectiveness. And on the panel, we have four individuals that will talk about their tenant associations and their effectiveness, how they use communication to assist the tenants and the residents, and how they do outreach work. So I'm going to introduce them to you, and then they have their presentations to make. And then we can open it up for question and answers. This is a very important part of the whole tenant association process. And I know that we just covered, did governance, but this part is important also. Such simple things as how do you communicate with the residents of the property and with the members. It's easy when it's 4 units, but it's not so easy if you've got 800 units. So how do you make sure that everyone gets that kind of information, and how do you connect them with the areas surrounding them, and how do you connect them with government agencies that can assist them? And I'm not going to read their entire bio because I know you guys can read. It's in the back of the program. The first person is Kathleen Payne Wilkes. She is the president of the 3921 Kansas Avenue Tenant Association. Tenant Association, thank you. And she is a graduate of Fisk University. And she is currently involved in, she's an ambassador of New York Life's $50 billion empowerment plan. Next to her is Monica Gilling, and she is the vice president of the 3921 Kansas Avenue Tenant Association. I did not know that Monica was into the performing arts. I was like, wow. I didn't know what her background was. But she specializes in nonprofit management, and she has a wide variety of experience. Iris Lipowitz is a native Washingtonian, and she graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School. And I have to say that because you have not met Christopher Lucas of our staff. He is a graduate of Wilson, and he thinks that's the only high school that exists in the United States. And Ms. Shreve's daughter graduated from Wilson High School. And she is, are you the president of this?
Yes.
She's the president of the 4000 Massachusetts Avenue Tenant Association. And we have a history with members of that association because they're very involved in our stakeholders groups. And so anytime we ask them to do something, they come forward and say, yes, we will do that. The last person is Elisa Peterson. And she is a senior at Georgetown University. She is not here. She may be on her way. I'm hoping so. She probably was trying to participate in everything. This is Georgetown University's homecoming, which is a big deal to them. One of our attorney advisors is a graduate of Georgetown. I don't know what it is about Georgetown people, but you know, he just like rah rah. I'm like, okay, calm down, calm down. And we were on their campus a year and a half ago when they got the little doggy, the new doggy, that was the mascot, who they have since kicked to the curb. But it was such a big deal. None of the students came to us because to them that's a big deal. So it may be that she's tied up in traffic and that type of thing, but when she comes, we certainly have a place for her. The order will be Ms. Payne Wilkes and Ms. Gilling will talk about their association, and then Ms. Lipowitz, and then if Ms. Peterson comes, we can pull her in. Ready?
Yeah, sure. So just to give you a brief history, our tenant association is relatively new. The background is the building, 3921 Kansas Avenue, had a history of being a little bit of a slum property. We had slumlords for several decades managing or owning the building, and in 2012, new owners came in. And as part of the process, the new owners hired a lawyer to help us incorporate a tenant association to facilitate a speedier process of sale. So that's how we came into existence. And since then, we have had quite a journey. And I hope that we can share some of our personal experience in what we've learned, both what to do and what not to do, and carry that back to your associations and your neighborhoods. Do we have a slideshow?
PowerPoint is over there.
Do you want to move here?
Might as well. Podium, okay, well, yeah, I guess so.
You go through?
Yep, sure. Online now, right? Product key? Is this the right one? No. You know what, I'm gonna,
I can do it for you.
okay, sorry.
You want to sit here?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll just go ahead and, we had slides, but we'll go ahead and read it, it's not a big deal. So the pros of our circumstances is that we were able to rid ourselves of slumlord owners and conditions. We were provided an attorney by the new owners free of charge, which is really an extraordinary circumstance. He was very qualified, it really helped us in a lot of ways. We did at some point question whether there was a conflict of interest, but in general I think we developed a quite good trust with him. We also were able to work with our neighbors and formed the tenant association. In general, we had large participation. Most people were enthusiastic or at least interested, and that was very helpful. It also brought up a lot of questions in terms of what's in it for me and what the community with the building and all of our neighbors were really interested in improving in the building, what the quality of life issues came up, so we were able to facilitate some really positive conversations around some of these questions. Now the cons were untested new owners. We had no idea what to expect. We had been operating under different management for so long that when the new owners came in, it was very much a different situation we were not necessarily prepared for. Again, can we trust the attorney? That was also something that we did question quite a bit throughout the process. And as I'm sure you all know, organization is hard work. And how do you get 23, 24 different people all on the same page, or at least trying to move in the same direction? So, and then what is the owner's end game? We had our tenants' agenda, but the owner certainly came in and had a different agenda, which was revealed over time. At the bottom you can see, and always be sure that you can live with what you're giving up. Think through the process from beginning to end. So you can go and read that. We'll move on to the next page. So here are some visual representations of some of the things we experienced. Now, first I want to tell you about Mike, tenant Mike, and the situation that we had with Mike. He was a young man. I think this is his first experience living on his own. So we were glad to have him in the building. About 4 months into his lease, he comes home, and before he flicked on his kitchen light, he happened to notice that the entire thing was full of water, which is this picture right there. It was like a fish bowl hanging from his ceiling. Fortunately, he did not turn on the light and was not injured. He did report the issue to management, and they came out and sort of fixed it. It was more or less just draining the lamp and not actually solving the problem. Over time, the problem persisted, and what Mike ended up doing is he stopped paying his rent, and he started living with a friend until the situation could be remedied. So I just want to throw it out there. Does anybody have an idea of what Mike should have done? Anybody have any ideas? Anything anybody's learned? Absolutely. Anybody else? Ideas of what Mike could do in this situation?
What did she say? You could put the rent into an escrow account.
It's certainly one thing. Well, here is what Mike should have done. First of all, have documentation of the complaint. And here you can see we did take pictures and saved emails communicating with the property managers. It's very hard to document a phone call. Email is much easier. Something in writing is always helpful. The next step is to get in touch with your tenant association board member or a trusted neighbor to help you navigate this process, which is what Mike did. He got in touch with Kathleen, our board president, and they started working on this problem together. The next thing is to contact the OTA. I'm sure we've all learned today what a fantastic organization that is and how they can really help you. Make an appointment, talk to an OTA representative. They will give you a variety of options. They will tell you what you can do in this particular situation. And instead of not paying rent, they can advise you how to withhold the rent without running the risk of eviction. So definitely take the time to go down and visit them. Possible avenues include housing conditions court, getting proper inspection for codes violation. Clearly, if you have a lamp full of water, something's wrong. And lastly, DC Landlord Court is not in your favor. The court that is best for fairness and equity will be the Housing Conditions Court. So that's what you want to consider in these particular situations. Now, what actually happened to Mike is a little different. So he stopped paying his rent, and the landlord eventually came after him trying to evict him for lack of payment. By the time Kathleen got involved, and after they were advised by OT attorneys, he set up an appointment to meet with the landlords, the property managers, lawyers, and he went in. And as Kathleen liked to say, he did not phone a friend. He showed up alone, and the lawyers handed him a deal saying that he would be forgiven of the $4,000 of back rent with the condition he move out of the building. So Mike thought that this was a fair deal. He was grateful not to have to pay the $4,000. He signed the agreement. So what could have happened if he had waited and had an appointment with the Housing Conditions Court, he could have, there's a lot of things that could have happened. He could have not only been forgiven for the rent because of the codes violations, he wouldn't have to surrender his apartment in a rent-controlled building in a very nice metro-accessible area. He wouldn't have to leave. He could have had the violations fixed, the rent continually held until the problems were resolved, or even have the judge order the management company put him up in another apartment or space until the problem is solved. So while Mike was fortunate in not having to pay that rent, he certainly did miss out on potentially some other opportunities. Fortunately, in his case, he was able to get in touch with the tenant association, who was able to facilitate some help in this particular situation. Pass it over to Kathleen.
So we've actually been asked to use the podium, so we
Okay.
can get this on tape so that everyone who's not here today can see it. So I'm gonna go ahead up to the podium. So the next case that we're going to look at is Miss Marcia's scenario. So you have the scenario with Mike, who was a younger guy, who didn't have a whole lot of experience. And then we have Miss Marcia, who's an elderly tenant, who decided to take a different route. So the pictures that you saw earlier were the light fixture from Mike, completely submerged. During that time period, we had some housing codes violations that Mike was able to get assistance with, that he was able to use as a defense. And then there was also a cease and desist order that was on our building at the same time period to stop work that was being done. So that was the actual cause of the light fixture issue. So for our building transfer of property from the old owners, which were the slumlords, they never did anything to the building to correct the issues. Our new building owners came in very enthusiastically and stated that they would make those changes. So they started working on it, and what happened was that our old tenants that live in the building did not have any of the changes that needed to be made, just general housing codes violations. So Ms. Marcia did not pay rent for 3 months. Pretty much the same thing as Mike. She did not contact the tenant association or any other neighbors about a pending eviction. She just kind of held it to herself. I know personally there's a level of shame that goes along with it when you cannot pay your rent. So that affects the entire situation and the end game and the fallout from that. Ms. Marcia went to court by herself without any advisement. So she did not stop and say, hey, Kathleen, I need some help. I'm having a problem with the landlord. She just showed up to court because she received her writ. She did admit that she owed the money, and of course, she didn't have a defense that she could have used to present a compelling case that most likely would have resulted in her favor. And then she did not utilize any resources, both in DC government agencies or the tenant association. So this affected her as well. She is older, and I know this because my mom is 80, and she has a level of trust in people. Mike didn't have a level of trust, and so therefore he went to someone, and he went to a few people to get his scenario resolved. Although the management company were very polite to her, there were tons of emails that went back and forth between them. They're there to collect your rent. And unfortunately, she found that information out because the pictures that were there before, there you go. The pictures that were there, one person's problem, that is all of her property set out on 3921 Kansas Avenue, okay? So you have two different scenarios with two different people. Things were handled in two completely different ways. Although once the OTA was involved in it, they were able to provide emergency legal resources. Unfortunately, it was entirely too late to help her. One person's problem is a community problem. So you may see a little picture that's kind of blurry there, but that picture is our entire building, our entire neighborhood that came out together to assist Miss Marcia to put her stuff into storage, to get her things off of the street, and to attempt to find a place for her in a long-term solution. So these are the things that you want to keep in mind within your own tenant association because it's very important to communicate. Had both of these people communicated with us, I'm pretty sure Mike would still be in his apartment. Miss Marcia would still be in her apartment as well. And we probably would be talking about something a little bit different today. Okay, so some of the things that, that you want to do is connect with each tenant on a regular basis. Now, our building has 24 units, so we're not a gigantic building with 139 units. We're a very small building compared to a lot of others that are in DC. Connecting regularly with each tenant allows you to know about their issues, the things that are occurring, whether it's a codes violation, something leaking, something peeling, something chipping, smoke, anything like that. You have the opportunity to change things from the very beginning so that it does not get to the point of withholding rent improperly. You have to ask nosy neighbor questions. If you don't ask the nosy neighbor questions, like, is everything okay with your rent? Are you having any issues? Is anything peeling? Is there something leaking? How's the communication with the landlord? If you don't ask those questions, people will never tell you. They will not say anything other than, hey, how's it going? And you say, hey, I'm fine. And that's it. And I asked Miss Marcia several times, hey, how are things going? I kind of had a feeling she seemed a little stressed. You have to kind of be aware of the tenants that are involved in your association. You must also instill trust and confidentiality because if people know that you're a gossiper and you talk about everyone's situation, no one's going to want to come to you and talk to you about it. And you don't want tenants to wait too long to tell you about an issue. So you want to make sure that they know that they can come to you for assistance. As far as efforts to communicate with the community, we have tons of resources. That's what today was about. I have on here start, right? There's a reason that I had that. Had we been a little bit more experienced with the association, we would have known that it's not just one connection with one government agency that's going to make the difference for your association, for tenants in crisis. It's going to involve being on the radar with all of these different groups. And so you'll have to be able to delegate duties to people who are trusted to get that information. So you definitely want to start with the OTA. That's my number one. Dolores Anderson has been instrumental with every other single contact that I've had as a president. You want to start also with your ANC, your area neighborhood commission. You want to go to those meetings because those meetings provide valuable information about what's going on in your neighborhood, and it brings in all of the resources. You want to review Housing Conditions Court. There's an email that's on their website, and you can look that information up. There's a video that explains exactly what Housing Conditions Court is, how it works, and how it benefits you. There are also neighborhood PACs, which involve the whole entire neighborhood. So it's another great place to connect with other tenant associations, other people that are in the neighborhood. When you have issues, you definitely want to contact DCRA. But one of the things with contacting them is that you have to know the right people. There are 1,000,001 numbers, 1,000,001 different places that you can go to look for that assistance that you need. And then you want to make sure that you make some new friends with other tenant associations because that's going to maybe help get you along a little bit further than you would have gotten by yourself. I know it helps me a lot as well. And then you also want to know who your council representative is because you're going to want to be on that person's radar as well. And then you also want to contact the DC mayor's office. And so, Monica, you want to come up and do the All That Glitters Ain't Gold? We were given a lot of promises within the Tenants Association when we started the negotiation process, and it looked really good. We were going from a slumlord to a brand new building owner who was going to put in some fabulous windows, some new toilets. We're going to get our walls painted. And so those were the things that we were looking forward to.
So we really did well, and this has come in handy as we are now pursuing breach of contract with the new landlord. We negotiated a contract to improve living conditions, and we put times associated for every single item involved. So when that date has now come and gone, we can move to the next step. It's really key because if you don't put a timeline along with any improvements that are promised, it may never happen. So we were really fortunate to have negotiated those. We created and developed a foundation for advocacy, and a lot of that has come through our experiences in the last year in terms of developing a strong network both in the community and with the DC government. We did get new windows that close and open and don't let snow, wind, or rain in. That was a really big change. And we have new toilets, security cameras, and key fobs. So for a building that was once a hotbed for illegal activity, it's pretty cleaned up and we feel safe. We negotiated money for the tenant association from the new owners in exchange for our TOPA rights. So we should be getting that check at the end of the first full calendar year of their ownership. That should be in December. Negotiated deliverable timelines in the contract, and this was also really exciting. We negotiated a hold on rental increases for 2 years from the date of purchase. So our rent will not increase, and part of this is in compensation for the tremendous amount of construction and work that is actually ongoing in our building. They just ripped out the carpets in the hallway, so tile's not in yet. The building's kind of a mess, so that was to compensate for any distress or decrease in quality while they go through the renovation process.
So if we knew then at the beginning of the negotiation process what we know now, we would have done a lot of things differently. We would have thoroughly investigated the owners. Google is a powerful tool. So if you have a development company that is interested in purchasing your building, make sure you use Google. We learned a lot of things about our new building owners that had we known, we would have never even entered into the contract. It's very serious. We would have required more control over the management company choice. Sometimes what happens is that you think that you're getting gold and it's all glitter. And so they have an ineffective management company that comes in that doesn't do anything at all. We know what's going on in DC with affordable housing. Ms. Marsha, when she was evicted, her rent was $562. She's lived in our building for 30 years, okay? The new apartments that they are renting are $1,600 a month. So you have to always keep that in mind and communicate it with each tenant about rent delinquency. At the beginning, we did have a good relationship with the management company. We were sharing information. So they would say, hey, can you talk to this person about rent? Along the way, they decided that they no longer wanted to have that communication with us, I guess because it was taking them away from their bottom line, which was to have higher rent. We would have contacted the OTA or another legal resource during the beginning of the negotiation process. Remember, Monica stated and told you guys earlier what happened with our legal representation. They were actually hired by the new owners. What we were told is that it was to expedite the process because they really wanted to come in and improve the conditions in our building. So we were all aware of that. We absolutely did not trust the attorney. We did not trust the building owners. We didn't trust the deal, which is the thing that forced us to negotiate timelines, specific things affecting us so that at some point, if we needed to file for breach of contract, that was possible. We would have attended ANC and PAC and other neighborhood community meetings, and we would have considered the owner's end game. Again, how things were presented to us is that, you know, gosh, these are terrible conditions that you all are living in, and we just want to make things better. We were happy to hear that, but again, the trust factor and the trust issue, you can't just accept fool's gold. You have to negotiate for every single thing that you want. Yeah, and don't leave anything on the table. Ask for it all. If you think that they might possibly want it and they were going to get something from it, you have to negotiate for something else that you want. It may not be something that you really want. It may just be a pawn idea. Put it out there anyway because you have to battle it the entire time. Just so everyone knows, so that you don't enter into the same situation with that we did with these specific owners. I have a limited amount of information that I can say. It's out there on Google if you'd like to look it up. What I would like for everyone to do is to look into the development company or the actual owners. You'll have to get their names, which is something that we didn't do at the very beginning. You want to look at the Nordheimer family. You want to look at Bill Waldy. And you would need to look at Urbane Management to gather an idea of the type of power that we're dealing with as a tenants association. Yeah, and you should investigate on your own to see. You should investigate the development company and the people who say that they want to come in and purchase their building. You'll also want to see what their track record is. After everything was over for us, that's when we found out who we were really dealing with. So I just don't want anyone else to make that the same mistake that we did. Communication with each tenant is important. So I'll take 2 seconds. We do go door to door. We knock on doors on mornings of meetings, and we drag people out to come to the meeting. We do a tenant survey, and we communicate with people face to face. We have an older crowd. We have a non-tech savvy crowd. So a lot of it is on the phone and speaking to people face to face. I'm a Gen Xer. A lot of our people are baby boomers, and they're not picking up on technology. And so one of the things that you may want to do is, if they don't have an email address, you may need to create an email address for them. And when they have a complaint, you may need to bring them to your place and type it for them and send it for them so that they have that documentation to prove whatever issues are going on. So I think that's about all that I have to say.
Does anybody have any questions at this time?
Is there anything more you can say about their end game?
No.
Well, I can. Well, do you want to know what the real end game is?
Yeah.
Okay. Did any of you go to the legislative? No one went to that. Okay. This is what the end game is. Affordable housing is very, very difficult to get in DC. If you have it, you need to keep it because you won't be living in DC. If you can only afford to pay $500 a month, you're not going to find that anymore in DC. So there is a major move this is not just this management company or this development company, this is all of DC. We are looking at a city with unaffordable housing that people are not even going to be able to afford to live here anymore if you really don't make $65,000, $70,000. This is very similar to what happened in San Francisco. If anyone knows anything about San Francisco, there were people in 2001, and I was there at the time, making $40,000 a year, living 3 and 4 people in an apartment because it's unaffordable for working class people to live. So that's the end game. Move the lower income people out and the lower rent paying people out to make way for all of this awesome development that we're seeing. So if a development project starts going up in your neighborhood, you're really going to want to look at who's doing it, why they're doing it, and how it affects you. It's one tenant, Miss Marcia or Mike, how it affects the building, right? Because you have a tenants association. And so when you lose 2 apartments, you are really going to lose 2 people that care about the same issues that you have.
Or have the same, are invested in the same kinds of things. If you have somebody who moves in, only plans to be in the building for 1 year, pay the high rent and move out, are they really going to be, caring about the same issues as you?
Right. So when you lose those people, you have new people that replace it. This is what we did find when we went out and visited the new owners' buildings. We did find that there were no people that were in the building for more than 2 years. There was not a remnant of a tenant association in those new buildings, and those were signs. We just weren't sure what to attribute them to. But you definitely want to think about what the end game is. The end game is always to make more money. They don't develop it because they want to make you feel good. They develop it because they want your money. And if your money is not enough money, then they want money from someone who is going to provide them with more money. That is the end game. So think about that when you see those development projects going up. Walter Reed is an awesome one to look at. That's where I learned about the AMI. What I was explained to by the ANC person or commissioner is that AMI in the DC Metro is $80,000 a year. That's what was explained to me.
What does AMI explain?
It is the average area median income. So we're not looking at just DC income, like the people who really needed the working wage bill, that's not us. That's not us at all. The people that they're looking at is Loudoun County. You know, I think that's the richest county in America, is that right? Fairfax and Loudoun County. We're put into that bucket with them. So, got to look at the development companies and what is truly affordable housing. Affordable housing is about $65,000 a year. That's affordable housing. So it's not for the person who, you know, who's close to retirement or retired, who is on a fixed income. It's not you. Yes.
I'd like to suggest.
Pardon me, sorry. If you can please use the mic for the questions so we can all hear. We have a microphone set for Q&A. Yeah, you can ask it right there.
I'm Lois Tett from Majority of Women-Owned Businesses, an organization I founded for small businesses, which is dormant now, but we're going to get it going again. When we look at the housing developers, many of them coming here, there is a law that says every residential unit or entity has to have so many low to moderates in there. I have a friend in Los Angeles. She's gone to them, of course, her being a lawyer really helps, our lawyer's assistant. Take them the law that is written that says this, because normally they will say, I don't know anything about that. What is that? I think it's called the Gray Amendment, but I'm not really sure. But and she shows them the law and they see what it says. Oh, well, I guess we do. But they don't tell that. So all of you thinking there's nothing for me and my Section 8 or low income according to my income.
Right.
She has no regular income that I know,
Right.
except when she has a case. But it's nothing like 65,000
Right.
that she's written down. And she's got the best unit in town, downtown. She can walk everywhere. And here, the people just don't know. So she told me how to do it. And she says, go to your council member, talk to him, see where that law is, get a copy, and watch the developing people coming in.
Right.
Then go to them and say, listen, you see this law here. Let them know of it.
Right.
And say, I am looking, and I see you have 3
And so
bedrooms.
what law is that?
Huh?
What law is that?
The law that states that every residential unit has to have so many moderate to low income in there. Maybe not half, maybe 1%, maybe whatever. They got to have some of them there because they're using our money.
Okay.
I think
New construction.
It's new construction, it's inclusionary zoning law, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because we need to get to our other two speakers, but basically it says that a percentage of the units must be affordable to certain folks, but units are being created, but not a lot of units are being created to address the shortfall that we need, and yes, some of them are in some of the newest places, but your unit does not have to be at the same quality as that unit that they're charging $3,500, $4,000 a month in rent. So maybe they get granted and you get a laminate countertop, but it's very laws that deal with that, and if someone needs information on it, I can give it to them afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now we'll have Iris Lipowitz from 4000 Mass Avenue Tenant Association.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm the president of a tenants association in Northwest between American University and the National Cathedral on Mass Avenue. The building has been a rental building since it was built in 1955. There are 440 rentable units in the building. And 6 years ago, the owner filed something called a capital improvement petition with the district government to basically request that the tenants pay for the windows that he wanted to install to replace the old windows, the original windows, and to do brickwork. The case was heard in December because the tenant association first got private counsel, then we got OTA to defend us. The case was heard in December, final arguments were filed in February, and we're still awaiting the decision. But I'm not here to talk about the case. I'm here to talk about how the tenant association recruits members and keeps them informed. Passed out to you today are our membership form, and it explains the goals of the organization, and it has the form. It's $10 a year to join. It doesn't matter whether you live in the apartment alone or whether you have 3 children in the apartment and there are 5 people in the apartment. It's still $10 a year. We have an automated system where we keep track of members, and we email all of our members once a week with a document called This Week. You also have an example of This Week passed out to you. This is the issue that came out last Sunday night, early Monday morning. And in it is a request, because we've had a lot of people move out and a lot of people move in. And so we have membership desks. We also included a membership form in our online This Week to try to attract more members. In This Week, we put out information which is of interest to people in the building. We have a lot of retirees in the building. We have a lot of families with young children. A lot of children are born when their parents live in the building and they're under 5. So we have a gaggle of young children. We have a lot of diplomats, not necessarily ambassadors, but we have a lot of lower level foreign embassy staff living in the building. Every country you've heard of and some you've never heard of. So it's Latin America, Europe, Asia, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, you name it, we have them. It's sort of like a little United Nations. You never know what language you're going to hear in the elevator. It's kind of interesting, and you become an authority on what people look like from different parts of the world, because you say, I've seen that face before. We put in articles of interest to the tenants, so whether it's retirees, young families, young single people, older people, whatever. So if you look at this most recent issue, there's an article about satellite TV service and lack of choice. Federal Communications Commission requires that our cable service be a competitive bid, that the owner shouldn't just pick a service and force us into some high-priced service. So that's an issue going on in our building right now. That's the first article after the membership. Second article was telling people to come to the summit and how to apply. Next article was about our board meeting that was held last Wednesday, and anybody who's a member who wanted to come should call me to make sure there's enough chairs. There's another article about the Tenleytown block party. There's a church in Tenleytown that has a block party this weekend, so we alerted people it's a free activity. And an article about proposed bus route changes in our neighborhood and how to go online and contact the bus authority about what you think of the bus route changes. So that's a pretty typical This Week. We have a member of our board is called the ombudsman. It's a woman, but it's an ombudsman, ombudsperson. She gets online and over the telephone complaints from people. It could be about the building not fixing something timely. It could be about the cable service being on the fritz, and anything in between, bed bugs, anything. She negotiates on behalf of the tenant association for the tenants with the management company. We have done a lot of other things for tenants in the building. I'll give you one example. Before our case went into court in December, OTA sent us a form for those tenants living in the building whose income was under $40,000 and wanted to file for an exemption from the possible surcharge when and if the judge rendered a decision. We still haven't had a decision, but the law says tenants who want to file for an exemption should do it then. You can do it later, but this would ensure that if there is a surcharge, they would be exempted. So they had to file a tax return, a form, and other documents. We didn't handle the documents, but OTA asked us to make the tenants aware of what the rules were. So we were in touch with OTA. We knew the people to send our tenants to telephonically to answer their questions having to do with taxes and other things, where to file the form. So we posted notices at the mailboxes. We post this week on the bulletin boards. Those who don't get it electronically get a paper copy. Anyway, people who needed information about the exemption knew where they would find out how to file. They also got telephone numbers, they got their questions answered. So we worked as an intermediary between OTA, who had the answers, and the tenants who needed to know. We have a problem in our building. We have spacious apartments, but there is no meeting room. And an effective tenant organization in a building with 440 apartments is really hindered, because without a meeting room, we rent space at a church when we have our annual meeting. We have a small back lobby, but it's divided by air conditioning equipment. So it effectively only seats about 50. We're having a meeting on Monday in the back lobby. DC Water, which is the Water and Sewer Authority, they are coming in to make a presentation to the tenants in our building because we abut Glover Park. And Glover Park, if you've read some of the newsletters in the city, is one of two parks. Soapstone Valley off of Connecticut Avenue is another one. We're going to have major pipe projects to reline sewage pipes in 2015, and DC Water is the sewer authority. National Park Service manages the parks, so the two of them together will run this project. We're having them speak to our tenants because a huge portion of our building abuts Glover Park. Think noise, dirt, parking issues, potential smells. So we are having a presentation in our back lobby, and we alert tenants to this, not only with notices by their mailboxes, but notices in this week. Okay, that's sort of my presentation on how we communicate. It's two ways. We let the tenants know with a newsletter and with notices. They call us and email us. And we have an ombudsman who gets questions telephonically and online. Any questions from you guys? It's a lot of work. Putting together the newsletter each week is a lot of work, but we are a 440-unit building. And it's very difficult and completely the opposite of a 24-unit building. Yes?
I have a question. You all just usually have an annual meeting, you don't have any monthly meetings, is that correct?
We have board meetings about every 6 weeks. We have an annual meeting of the tenants once a year. But if there's a court decision soon, I imagine we'll be renting one of the churches and having another meeting because there will be a lot of questions. But normally we have one meeting a year. And at our last meeting in June, we had OTA as speakers about the case. Yes, in the back.
I heard you say you have an annual meeting with the tenants,
Yes.
but
It-
the board meets.
Our board
Now,
meets.
now, I'm confused. Are the board members making the decisions for the tenants and then having a general meeting dictating to them things that you all agreed to do in the board meeting?
Well,
Explain that to me.
okay, with 440 units in the building, potentially 1,000 people in the building, getting a vote on things is quite difficult. The tenants vote every June for a slate of candidates.
That sounds like a
The
little...
candidates are the board they vote for 13 people for the board, and the board makes decisions.
Okay, it seems to be a biased situation. If you are paying dues to have membership in an organization, then everything should be done with the board, the members of the tenant association.
Well, in the same way that people all over the country vote for senators and members of the House, and those representatives in the Senate and the House,
This is not the Senate and the House.
Excuse me, ma'am.
This is a
Excuse me.
tenant association.
That's your opinion, which we can respect, but this type of structure works for 4,000 Mass Avenue, and this is one of the strongest tenant associations that we work with, and we don't get complaints from 4,000 Mass saying, oh, they made decisions and we don't know what was going on, and they did this and they did that. And as I said in the previous session, which you may not have been in, each structure of the tenant association depends on the needs of the tenants at that particular residence premises.
yeah, and the biggest thing ongoing in our building right now is the capital improvement petition lawsuit, which, as I said, was heard by the judge in December. Final arguments were filed by both sides in February, and 7 months later, we're still waiting for a decision.
The question I'm raising, I want to be perfectly clear about this, about the tenant rights and the voice of the tenants. That's what I'm raising.
We're,
And they have an ombudsman to contact.
right. We don't get paid. We do not get paid. You know, it has nothing to do with,
Right.
yeah. Yes.
Does the ombudsman share the questions and concerns with the rest of the board?
She always shares them with me. Most of them have to do with an individual tenant vis-à-vis the landlord. I mean, it could be bed bugs, it could be a leaky toilet, something.
But if it was an issue that may concern many tenants,
Oh,
or the
if there
majority
were
of
an issue
tenants,
concerning many tenants,
then that would be, the ombudsman would share with the board, and then you would decide.
absolutely.
how-
And we frequently put information in this week, like the next, in 2 weeks, we'll have an issue with full of concerns dealing with people moving in and not having sufficient carpet and driving the people underneath crazy, or people playing their TV set at 2 o'clock in the morning and driving other, you know, this kind of thing, yes. And we broadcast those issues in this week. Yes.
It just went in one ear and out the other, what I was going to say. Do you ever look at everything that people bring to the ombudsman and see a general trend of stuff going on, especially with repairs and maybe housing code violations in each individual person's apartment that might be common?
comment. We encourage all tenants to go first to the management office in the building with their complaint in writing and go again a second time. And if it is not handled properly, then we take it on. But that's generally the rule. We don't just plunge in. Most things are taken care of by management eventually in apartments. It's rarely the same day that management does things, unless you go at them, and I don't give them any grace period. I go to them, and I want it done that day in a certain time period. And I'm very specific, and normally they do it, because they know I'll get after them. For example, the faucet in my kitchen, the nozzle fell off and broke, and I got them to come in within the hour and put a new nozzle on. I mean, it's a nothing repair, but I didn't wait around. It was done, and I was there when they did it, and that was that.
Can we take one more question, and then we need to get to Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Now, I was just going to say, thank you. I was just going to say that I'm a newly elected president of a tenants association that's about 3 or so years old. And one of the things that I implemented my first meeting was a tenant concern form. And I let them know that if you go to management with an issue for your individual unit and it does not get resolved, then you put it in writing and bring it to me, and I or a designated board member will, if it's at all possible, resolve the issue or let you know why you need to work on something to resolve it yourself. And I let them know that if you have problems, don't discuss it with the other 149 members. It won't get resolved. Put it in writing and bring it to us, and either I or the resident service manager will see that your issues are taken care of.
We are having problems with the satellite TV. Our owner negotiated with a company called MDU DirecTV. We've had horrendous problems with reception, and people are paying a fortune. I am not a cable subscriber. I get the over-the-air channels. I don't get the cable. But MDU is probably going bankrupt this month, and our owner will probably try to negotiate with Comcast or Verizon to his advantage and not to the advantage of tenants. And we're trying to force management into having 2 cable companies so that we get a better deal. Stay tuned. Maybe next year I'll report on it.
Our last speaker is Elisa Peterson, who is with the Student Government Association at Georgetown, and I am so happy she is here. She is a go-getter, and I will turn the floor over to you. And Elisa, we did pass out the one page that you put together, plus the article that appeared in the Washington Post.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Alyssa, and I'm a senior at Georgetown, and I want to thank the Office of the Tenant Advocate for inviting me here, and I want to thank my fellow presenters. We're a very new tenant association, so it's great to hear the lessons that they have for us and how we can improve our efforts. But to give some background on our efforts, we're the Georgetown Student Tenant Association. I'm the executive director. I have about 6 staff with me who are also students at Georgetown. We're all volunteers. And essentially, we were founded kind of through working with Ms. Anderson and through OTA, because we came in with sort of some issues in that landlords in Georgetown, for example, we've never had an organized effort against them. There's a lot of systemic factors that are difficult to deal with for students, so I'm here to talk about kind of the needs of an underserved population. So in terms of how we started, essentially, we found that students, for decades have had terrible experiences with landlords. We actually had a fire in the early 2000s in which a student died due to a faulty smoke detector. And it's something that it's so disappointing because even after that tragic incident, we still had terrible situations with landlords. So we've been working with the Office of the Tenant Advocate and DCRA to try to figure out how students can organize and how, since we tend to be short-term renters, how we can combine our efforts to create a more affordable and safer houses for all students. So in terms of an underserved population, students are an extremely underserved population. You're looking at the amount of complaints that Georgetown students file to OTA, and it's extremely low when compared to other parts of the city. It's extremely low when compared to anecdotal evidence as to how the university behaves and how landlords behave with students. And in terms of some of the barriers, firstly, most of the students are first-time renters. I'm a first-time renter. Most students don't know what the codes are, what's going on, and they're really busy with schoolwork, so they don't have the time to figure out what's going on. Another issue is that a lot of times students can't afford the rents here in DC because they're so expensive, especially in Georgetown. So most of the time parents are paying the rent. When parents live most of the time several hundred miles away, they can't be super involved in the process. So it really opens up the system for a lot of abuse of student tenants. Another issue is that you do have the university as a resource, but the university is also the group that enforces violations of the code of conduct. They can suspend you, they can expel you. So students don't feel very comfortable coming to the university as a resource. And in addition, you look at this the situation where students tend to be short-term renters. We tend to the market in Georgetown is extremely competitive. You actually have to go and get a lease a year before your rental starts. And so it's extremely competitive, and a lot of students are left without housing because of the competitive market. So what happens is students tend to live there for only a year, so they tend to put up with much more abuses that other tenant associations wouldn't tolerate. So we're kind of placed in a difficult situation in trying to empower students and get them to know their rights. And another issue is that when we're in Georgetown, when we're in other areas, it's very difficult to access DC services. I know DCRA and the Office of the Tenant Advocate hold office hours, but the issue is that students, it's very difficult for them to come. It's very difficult for them to get off campus, especially with their busy schedules. So as you see, there are a lot of barriers to student tenants, but working with OTA and working with DCRA, who have been fantastic in helping us, we're trying to develop a sustainable structure to promote empowerment of student rights. And I guess we've only been started for about a few months or so, and we actually haven't even voted on our bylaws yet. So as you know, we're a very new tenant association. But some lessons that I found in the process, that it's extremely helpful to have peers advising students. As we can see in other tenant associations, the most sustainable and effective structures are when people who are invested and are renting those same houses are advising students. I'm sure my fellow panelists can testify that it's helpful to have people in the building working with other people in the building, and it kind of creates a structure in that you know the climate and it makes you a more credible source. So we've established this tenant association, which is about 6 volunteers. We offer several services, which include lease reviews, in which students who are looking to rent properties can come in and speak to advocates. Lease consultations, in which students who are experiencing problems with their landlords can come in and speak to me and my partner, and we can kind of work through connecting them with the appropriate resources in DC. In addition, we also offer an advocacy effort, which is in which we work with the Office of the Tenant Advocate and DCRA to try to make sure that more properties have basic business licenses. Because right now, we have about 400 properties that are rented out in Georgetown, and around 50% do not have basic business licenses. So, I mean, the issue with that is that we have no idea when these properties have been inspected. The student who passed away in the early 2000s, that house did not have a basic business license. It just creates a situation where we have no idea what's going on. And even if the landlords are strong landlords, first of all, they're depriving the city of needed revenue, and they're also unsafe buildings. So the OTA and DCRA have been extremely helpful in working with us to try to figure out the best efforts to try to get everyone covered under that licensing process. Something else that has been really helpful is kind of establishing a local resource, and that now instead of going into DC to figure out these resources, students can walk 30 seconds to our office, and when they're in our office, they can talk to us, and we can kind of give them a resource and based on what their rights are. We can also help them figure out where are the appropriate resources in DC that I should contact. I see myself as a conduit to OTA and DCRA who know more about the law and about this process than I do, but students wouldn't even know what OTA and DCRA are. And when we have such valuable resources in this city, it's a shame that people don't know how to access them. So we see ourselves as a point of access and a way to improve opportunities for students to access resources. And in terms of our services, we can connect people to the Office of the Tenant Advocate. We can look for problematic clauses in leases. For example, I met with a client last week who had a security deposit of $15,000, which is...
What?
Yes.
$15,000?
$15,000 for a year in advance. And we looked and we said, this is like 5 times your rent. It would only charge your security deposit for 1 month's maximum. But had the student not come to us, I mean, the student was low income, so they couldn't have lived there, but how could you afford to pay $15,000? Yeah, I mean, I can't afford that, I don't know who, but like, but just like the fact that, I mean, the situation's fairly extreme in Georgetown, but it's just as like, for example, we had another student who had rats die in the back of her house, and after 3 weeks, the landlord refused to remove them, so we had to work with her to get a housing inspection through DCRA. And the fact is, she didn't even know DCRA existed, so how are they supposed to access these resources when, I mean, it's such a systemic problem. So we are a new association, and we are looking to improve, but these are just some of the barriers we face. And we're just trying to create a more sustainable structure for access to students. So if anyone has any questions.
Let me add, because some of you just gasped at the amount of the security deposit. In my experience dealing with Georgetown students, and most of these people are renting single-family houses, so there's more than one person living there. The lowest rent I think I dealt with was $2,500. The highest rent a month was $10,000. It's $10,000 per month.
Yes.
And so, and sometimes these housing providers, because they know the students need a place to live, and their attitude is, well, if you don't take it, the next person will. They don't make any repairs. I remember speaking to a young woman who was sleeping on the back porch that was against code, and it was cold, but she said she couldn't find, she was just gonna put up with it because she couldn't find anything as cheap as what she was paying. And I was asking her, is your health worth that? Because I would hate for someone to have to call her mother and say, well, your child froze on the back porch of this place. But yeah, it's nothing to see $7,500, $9,000, $10,000.
Plus security?
Huh? Plus security. And so one of the things I want to say about Alyssa is that they came to us. I do the work with the students. I love working with the students. I spent 16 years in higher ed, and it's just a joy to go out and speak with them because they don't know what is going on. All they know is I'm getting my own place and I can do what I want. And so you talk about all of these things, and they came to us with a proposal to deal with the problem. And so I applaud them for it, and we're hoping that the other colleges and universities in the district will consider their plan and come up with something, if not the same tenant association or something similar, because we, even though they may not think it, the institutions, we see students from every last one of them, American, Georgetown, GW, Howard, Trinity, Catholic, we see them all. Thank you. Any questions?
Exactly how many members do you have in your
Okay, he's coming with the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi. Response to you is how many members do you have in your tenants association? And to the other lady that mentioned, I forget which one, I think it was you, about problems. Have y'all considered partnerships with resources that can help you have meetings at their places? I mean, they're on their building, and as a write-off for them, as a helping a nonprofit, that's a plus, and you don't have to pay for meetings.
Oh, you're in
I
response to...
mentioned, yes, we don't have a large enough room in our building. Our building was built before party rooms were incorporated into buildings. So we usually go to a church and rent the church for 2 hours. We have a lot of older tenants in the building who wouldn't go very far, and this church is literally across the street from our building with a huge parking lot. It is also handicap accessible. So it has all the necessities for us. And we've looked at other options like the police station, but the meeting room is small. The Tenley Library, but the meeting room is small. So the church with its big parking lot and handicap accessible space is the best option.
But they are hefty in price. I know a church I
Yeah.
visit has 5 units of buildings. People, if I charge them in for my meeting, even though I was a member for 30 years, I'm going to get a hefty price comparable to corporate. So why not approach corporate? Because they can lend you someone to do that for a year for free.
Who are you saying? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Corporate level people. I'm not, and they're all over the place. And
Well,
they make all kinds of money, and they should give back with free space.
It depends on the area. One of the things when we work with tenant associations and they're trying to plan meetings is to identify the resources in the community where they can have meeting. And they can decide if they want to go to the library, whatever. They have to figure out a place that will accommodate the numbers that they need. Under the tenant right to organize, tenants can meet on the premises in a party room if there is one, or they can meet in any common area as long as they are not blocking the access into the building. And I always tell people, I have met in one building that's absolutely gorgeous, and the lobby area is like twice this size. We met on one side. I've met in party rooms. I've met in laundry rooms where it's so hot you think you're going to pass out. I met in one place they didn't have meeting rooms because they were garden-style apartments. There wasn't anything nearby. We met in the parking lot under the tree. So, you know, it just depends. You have to look at
Each situation.
each situation, and I am like, what she said, I'm not going too far for a meeting in the evening.
I
I'm
mean,
like,
we have 90-year-old people
Right.
who will not go very far.
well, I'm going across the street. That's easy for me. If it means we have to chip
See
in.
who's over there. He may be able to give you some space.
But
need to look
it
at
works
that.
for them. See, the thing is,
On one of their branches.
each tenant association decides to do things based on their needs. This works for them. I cannot criticize what they do.
No
It-
criticism, just a
No,
little
it
better.
works for
I'm sure
them.
they'd like
Now,
more money.
another group, I may be working with a group in Southeast, and they can't afford to pay the church, and, you know, we're gonna have to look at, well, what's available? Is the library down the street, or I think one meeting I met a man in the community who lived down the street from the building, had a large enough living room. He let people meet in his living room. So, you know, you have to be flexible.
You do. But you need to look at it.
There's a question in the back. We need the microphone back there. I'm gonna pay this young man. He's just.
If you're nonprofit 501c, you can get funding from big corporations or whatever. If you look it up, Foundation Center, to get the money to pay for a whole year or several years to be at the church. I think that's what she was leading to.
She was saying that if, as a nonprofit organization, if your association is nonprofit, you can get funding and support from foundations potentially.
Get a grant.
Foundation is a resource for that.
To pay for the meeting at the church. That's what I'm saying.
So that's an option.
Okay. I'm not aware of, I mean, we pay our district tax, but I don't think we are a 501c3.
I don't think you are.
We are not a tax exempt.
Right.
We are not a tax exempt organization.
Right. And if you're not raising a lot of money, you don't need to be one.
Then anybody can help you and still get some sort of
No, the only
No.
thing is, people can help you even if you are not a 501c3 organization.
But there's no
The question
taxes.
is whether or not they can write that off as a
Yeah.
deduction. And some of the corporations and organizations, the bottom line, because the money is not that much, is they don't care. They'll just give it to you anyway. So it just depends. And that's part of that whole bit about reaching out to the community, seeing what resources, who's out there, who can help you, and that type of thing. Like, for example, with Ms. Peterson, with Georgetown, I wouldn't expect them to have meetings every month. They're scattered all over the place because they're usually in individual houses and stuff. So you set it up, as Ms. Libowitz was saying, you've got a board that acts on behalf of the members. Is there anything, there's a question back?
But they can meet on Skype, because they know how to do that.
Yeah.
Alyssa, how many students do you have that are involved? Like, how many clients?
Yeah, sure. Should I answer that? So, just to follow up in terms of how many students we have about 400 properties with undergraduates. Those properties tend to be 5 or 6 students, so it's a sizable amount of people. In terms of, I've also served graduate students as clients. Those are outside of our mandate, but we're obviously not going to refuse them help if they come to us. So it's a very, over 1,000 students potentially who are involved. But the issue is it's very decentralized in that students aren't living in the building, so it's kind of an unorthodox model for a tenant association, but we're just trying to provide them resources, so.
We have time for one more question.
I have a question to the panel. Do you have any suggestion as to how to keep your tenants coming to the meetings? Okay, we have a meeting, we set up a meeting, we try to do monthly meetings, even bi-monthly meetings, we even tried that. But it's always the same group that comes. Okay, we had renovations done in our complex. Now, we have new tenants that have moved in. We even had a meet and greet. They came to the meet and greet. We told them when the next meeting was going to be. Not one showed.
How many,
Any suggestions?
how many people do you have in your tenants association? Or how many tenants do you have, period?
Now, see, that's a hard question. Of the, as we call it, the legacy group, the old group, there was 25, okay?
How many units?
How many units?
We have 88 units now. We've gotten in some new tenants, as I said, I'd say maybe it's about 15, 20 have moved in, plus the 25 that we already had.
Okay.
But when we had the last meeting, it was about 10, maybe 15 of us, and 4 of us were the board.
So it seems maybe you're closer to our end than what you are to their end. So this is what I would suggest, and we had to do this even with a 24, 23 unit building, is that maybe have one person that's on one floor contact the new tenants, and it tends to work out better that way because they get to know the person that's on their floor. It allows them to feel more comfortable and get to know your neighbor. And that's really what it comes down to. No one's going to show up because you give them a welcome packet. It's going to be continual and constant conversation with them. That's, for us, that's what it tends to help get the people out to come to the meetings. You have to have constant contact with them. If you don't have constant contact, then they're not going to bother coming to the meetings.
I want to follow up a little bit. You also have to delegate that responsibility. Like Kathleen just said, it's not just one person. It's one person on each floor because with 88 units, you have to delegate that responsibility and let people get to know their neighbors.
Right, we designated building captains. That's something that we had instituted before we had the renovations. And we had even talked about, starting that back up. Because they stayed. It wasn't enough people for floors because, like I said, at that time, we could probably do floors now because more people are in the buildings. But at first.
Another suggestion is that as you get to see different tenants in the building, like Monica and I, we live across the hallway from one another. So I'm always knocking at her door or she's always knocking at my door. Each floor has neighbors that will look out for the other neighbor, so people just naturally aggregate to one another. So you want to look at that, and you want to find out who is friends with whom in the building. If you can find that out, what you can do, and I just did this recently because we have something very big and very important coming up, is that when you call people or when you see people, you say, hey, I know you're close to Tracy. Can I get you and Tracy together? Can I get you to call Tracy on the phone and tell her how important this issue is and that it's important for her to come to the meeting? Can you be responsible for that one person? And if you could find someone to do that, then that will help out a lot, because now they're not just going to an association meeting, they're going to an association meeting with a friend. You're welcome.
What we're gonna do is I'm gonna officially close, but if you wanna stay and talk, because this year I promised that I would close on time, and I didn't do it. I mean, because last year we just stayed here till, we stayed here a long time because people had questions. But I do wanna thank the panelists, for taking time out of their busy schedules to do this. There are evaluations in front of you. You can fill those out and bring them up. I'm going to officially close, so that's the, unless they want to keep taping. But then if you have other questions, you can come up and ask them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, ladies.
It was great to meet you.
Glad you made it.